Welcome back to Level 10 Leaders, the podcast for people who know that strategy is easy, but leadership is hard. I'm Ryan Castle, and today's guest is Scott Anderson. Scott spent 21 years in the US Army, retiring as a major. He then moved to the UN humanitarian leadership, most recently spending 15 months in Gaza after October 7, 2023, leading one of the most complex, high-pressure environments on Earth. In this conversation, Scott breaks leadership down to what actually matters when the stakes are real. We talk about knowing yourself, why authenticity and consistency create psychological safety, especially in adversity. We unpack the hire slow, fire fast concept, how great leaders protect culture by making hard people decisions early. And we explore drowning out the noise, how in Gaza, one metric, the price of flour, told Scott more than 100 reports ever could. We also compare military and civilian leadership, discuss burnout and what it means to step away when you're no longer at your best. If you're leading people, making decisions under pressure, or trying to focus on what truly moves the needle, this is the episode for you. Let's dive in. Scott Anderson, welcome along to the Level 10 Leaders podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Ryan. It's a pleasure to join you.
Yeah, Scott, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You have some fascinating experience in your career, which I'm looking forward to unpacking, and I think our audience is going to get some really great insights today. But let's help our audience get to know you just a little bit with our fast fact questions. Are you a breakfast or dinner guy?
Oh, breakfast, 100%. I'm a morning guy, so breakfast is the way to start the day.
Okay. What did you hit this morning for the breakfast?
Pretty standard breakfast of eggs, avocado, and cottage cheese.
Got it nailed. Alrighty. In the holiday, would we find you doing something adventurous like bungee jumping, or are we more likely to find you on the pool lounger with a good book and a cocktail?
Probably a bit of both, actually. I like a little adventure. I also like to relax and read. But yeah, love to, scuba dive, skydive, done some bungee jumping. All that stuff is fun, but each has their place. The book and the cocktail after the day of adventure, I guess, what I would say.
I think that's a great combo. I like your style. Yeah. It's very much mine as well. Okay, I'm interested, Scott, when you're looking to learn something new, do you have a preferred medium? Do you like to read? Do you like to watch video? Do you like to talk live about it? What's your preferred medium?
Yeah, my preferred process is I like to read first. I like to kind of understand, especially if it's like a new leadership concept, what's the context? Where are they coming from when they develop this? And then I like to try to apply it in real life. So I sometimes use my staff as guinea pigs, if you will, to see how stuff actually works in practice.
Wow, you've got to go from theory to practice, right, Joe, to make things happen. So I like that approach, and I'm sure some of your team have had some fun experiments run on them.
Yeah, not all of them have worked exactly as you thought, but you always learn something, probably even more so from the ones that don't work out the way you'd hope they would.
And does it come with one of those warnings, no human was harmed in this experiment?
Yeah, something like that. At least I hope, at least physically. I don't know, psychologically, may have to some people.
A little bit of damage here and there.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's okay. Makes them stronger.
Okay. And cats or dogs?
Both. Currently cats, but I like both. Had a great English bulldog. She was like a 70-pound lap dog, had a heart attack and passed on. And now I have a couple of British short hair cats. They're kind of like dogs. They just follow you around. Other difference is you don't have to walk them. So it's kind of nice.
True. Pretty low maintenance.
Pretty low maintenance, yeah.
Okay. And I'm guessing from your comment earlier about being breakfast, you're also an early riser more so than a night owl?
Yeah, I am. I think I am naturally, and the Army kind of helped reinforce that early rising mentality.
Yeah. What's your get up time?
5. Get up at 5.
Yep. Nice.
Sleep around 10, up at 5, and get on with the day.
Yeah, I like it. I have a similar zone. Alrighty, if you had some time out watching some entertainment, what genre would you be watching? Are you a thriller, comedy, drama?
I'm a science fiction guy. I have been all my life, like science fiction, fantasy. That's kind of my mind candy, both for movies and reading. When I'm not reading something productive, but that's where I fall. And I'll watch anything except horror. I figure the world is scary enough. I don't need to add to the drama. But yeah, science fiction is kind of where I sit.
Okay, I like that. All right, I wonder, Scott, if you could give us sort of a brief history of your career path. I've have some knowledge of it, and I'm really fascinated. I wonder, could you give a brief history for our audience? And I think it'll set some really great context for our discussion today.
Sure. So I spent 21 years in the U.S. Army, or just shy of it. Went 10 years enlisted and went to officer candidate school, became an officer, retired as a major. Couple tours in Afghanistan after what happened 9/11 with 10th Mountain Division. After I left the military, I worked in Saudi Arabia for about a year with the U.S. government doing foreign military sales, which is a fascinating thing. And then kind of by accident, I drifted into the UN doing humanitarian work in Gaza. I spent the first time about 8 years in Gaza, and then a few years in Jerusalem, a little bit of time in Afghanistan. And then I went back to Gaza after the horrible events of October 7th, 2023, and spent about 15 months there trying to help both the civilians in Gaza as well as Israel manage everything that was going on there in terms of getting aid to people. Now I've landed here with Real Property Management Express in Sioux Falls. I'm the chief operating officer, and it's also a fascinating opportunity, if quite different.
I would imagine so, and possibly also hope so, living in a slightly more peaceful environment now than some of the ones you've experienced. Can you share a story with us, Scott, of somewhere maybe you felt you created real impact, or you in an environment where there's so much devastation and destruction and heartbreak and hurt? Do you feel like is there a moment that comes to mind for you where you felt you were able to contribute to the positivity in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard often to measure impact in a war zone because a lot of the metrics we would use, like in the United States, you can always see how much somebody's making, how much their income, right? The IRS can tell you more or less, and that just helps us define who was in need of assistance, who was not. In Gaza, when I was there, everybody was in need of assistance. The devastation was pretty widespread, and the impact that the conflict had on everybody's lives was quite significant. So one of the ways we used to measure our impact was the cost of flour in the market. Flour is a big staple of the diet in Gaza. It's a huge part of the food basket. Before the conflict, it was about 25 shekels for a 25 kilo bag. I guess for context for our listeners, that's around $6 or $7. Kind of depends on the exchange rate.
Sure.
And we actually got it to a point it was lower than that in Gaza during the conflict, which meant we were getting enough to people that there was enough supply, that demand wasn't too significant. And you could really almost feel the atmosphere being calmer. People were calmer. It's like the hierarchy of needs. If your immediate needs of food are met, you're going to be just a little bit calmer. And I think that was really a pretty significant impact for us. Unfortunately, it didn't always stay that way. It went up and down, but it was, and that was probably in around April, May of 2024 that we got to that point. It was really before the operation that took place in Rafah kicked off. And I felt we'd done a really good job at that point of addressing the needs of quite a few people.
Fantastic. It's a huge impact. And can I ask, Scott, why did you choose to step away from the UN and come back to this role at Real Property Management?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all reach a point in roles where we don't have anything left to contribute, right? I mean, what I saw in Gaza was horrific. The impact it had on people in Israel was horrific, and it takes a toll on you seeing that much destruction. 15 months, I mean, I think a year really is about all anybody should have stayed there, and I advocated for that quite strongly. We're all, I think, pretty resilient as human beings, but you can only see so much before it starts to impact you. And when you're in a leadership role, it's even more important that you're aware of where you're at mentally, and your ability to, stand in front of people and give guidance and drive strategy and drive the operation. And I just kind of reached the end of that point where I wasn't quite as sharp. I didn't have as much to give, and both the people of Gaza, but also the people in the humanitarian operation that I was leading deserve somebody that's there 100%. And once I reached that point, I knew it was time to move on and do something else.
Yeah, amazing self-awareness, and a big thank you for the contribution you've made to the world, really, I think, from your service right through to what you've done with the UN and helping people in the most need. It's really an incredible contribution, so thank you for that. Scott, I'm sure during that time you've held, obviously, numerous leadership positions, and you've learnt plenty of things about leadership. It's a core part of your role now at Real Property Management Express, helping lead the business there and grow other leaders in the organization. Can you share with us some of your top leadership insights? Maybe give us those at a sort of summary level, and then we might unpack them a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one is know yourself. Most leaders fail because they try to be something they're not at their core, right? You don't have to be outgoing, gregarious. You don't have to be inward or introspective, introverted. You just have to be yourself. And I think to expand on that a little bit, the two things that come to mind with that are authenticity and consistency. If you're authentically yourself, if you're consistent, people respond to that. They respond to that kind of, to that kind of leadership. I think the second thing I would offer is, drown out the noise. We have so many points of data, and we certainly did in Gaza. And we had 80 humanitarian organizations, $2 billion budget, working in multiple sectors. It would have been real easy to dive into the detail and get lost in the detail when it comes to decision making. So you have to figure out how you make decisions, which ties into kind of knowing yourself, and figure out what's actually important, right? Like I talked about the flour earlier, that was important.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
How many bags went to each person is probably less important. There was enough flour, so that's what mattered. That's the key kind of decision. Do people have water to drink? So figure out what's important for what you're doing, and just focus on that. Drown out the noise. And I will admit, I've forgotten the third one I told you earlier.
The fire fast, recruit slow.
Yeah, fire fast, recruit slow. The most important assets we have in any organization are people and time, right? And making sure you hire people that fit your culture, that fit your values, that are trying to accomplish the mission you do is really the most important thing you do as leaders, is bringing in those people. When you hire somebody, you're hiring for potential, right? They aren't going to walk in and immediately start making a contribution, be it money or aid or whatever the case may be. But if you hire the right person, they can really contribute to what you're doing and make the organization better. Similarly, if you have somebody that is not meeting the standard, they are not aligned culturally and values, you can't get rid of them fast enough, because the damage they can do to any organization is almost immeasurable. And every day you let that linger, it undermines and erodes leadership in the company. It erodes faith from the staff, because everybody knows when somebody's not performing or when they're not a match. I don't ever regret taking too long to hire, but I do regret taking too long to fire.
Quick break. If you're serious about scaling your EOS business, listen up. Here's the truth. Most companies stall because their managers can't lead. We built a system to fix it. At Level 10 Leaders, we turn managers into leaders so you can step back, scale up, or sell with confidence. Here's a quick win. Take 3 minutes to get a data-driven report of your team's LMA, leadership, management, and accountability strength. Uncover your biggest growth gaps. Take the LMA quiz now at lvl10.us/LMA. It's fast, and I'll show you exactly where your team is getting stuck. Let's get back into the podcast. I think we can all align with the importance of having someone that is aligned with values and that is going to be a good culture fit. In your view and experience, Scott, how do you test for those things during an interview process?
Yeah, so we follow something that's called the WHO process, WHO. There's a scorecard around it, and there's a whole book on hiring around this, and it helps identify, if you use this process of interviewing, it helps identify really who people are at their core. There's enough examples, that you can pull from their body of work that you can kind of figure out, who they are, how they approach problem solving, how they approach communication, how they approach disagreement with colleagues, right? Because we're not all going to agree ever.
Of course.
You can have positive disagreement, right? Where you come together.
It's required.
It's required. You exchange views, and you can agree to disagree maybe at the end, and you get on with your day. And what you don't want is people that would harbor a grudge. So, for us, it usually takes 2 or 3 interviews. We have a couple personality tests that we use as well. And you just have to invest the time, right? And I think sometimes we're scared of everything else we have to do during the day, so we shortcut that recruitment process, but you can't. You just have to invest the time. You have to do the work. And if you're in doubt, keep investing the time. If you're in doubt, there's a reason you're in doubt, right? And you have to listen to yourself. And, the other thing I said, it's kind of like knowing yourself as a leader. You have to know your company, know your organization, right? Who are we? Who are we trying to be? And does this candidate fit that mold?
Okay. And when you're testing for values fit, does the WHO process allow you to test for that as well? Or is there something else you do in that process to really unpack values?
We use like the culture index as one testing. We use DISC. A lot of it depends on the role. You're going to invest a little more in a like executive or leadership role than you would maybe in an entry level role, right? The skill set you're looking for are different. But the WHO does allow you to draw out maybe not directly, but indirectly people's values, right? Because if I just ask you, Ryan, what are your values? You're going to tell me whatever my company values are, right? If I'm hiring you, because you prepared.
Whatever I found on the website.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever I found on the website. And so you have to approach it in a way that they don't understand they're being asked about their values, even though they are. Like I said, how you approach disagreement with a colleague. Right, that speaks to who you are, your values. Are you open-minded? Are you able to take constructive criticism from somebody? If somebody comes to you and says, I don't think this is a good idea, and they explain why, you may not disagree. You may agree or disagree with what they have to say in terms of the criticism. But if you take it positively, that reinforces more. And at some point, they are going to give you something that's important for feedback that you can take on board. So that's kind of how we approach it, is through those examples, through how people look at things. And from that, you can sort of ascertain what are their values, how do they live their lives, at least at work, and decide if they're a good fit for what you're trying to achieve or not, culturally as well as financially. And we were here to make a profit.
Sure. And maybe comparing recruiting people into a UN type environment where they're going to be exposed to high stress, high emotional components by comparison to, a more stable environment. Was there things that you did particularly to help test and see whether you felt people were going to be able to deal with that kind of extreme environment?
Yeah, I think the way I approached it in the UN was different in that I looked for people that served in the military in particular. I didn't necessarily care which one. We had people from Australia, from Europe, Africa. If you've been in the military, you've been through some stress, almost always, right?
Yes.
And your ability to deal with that is just a little different than everybody else. Your ability to deal with hardships is just a little different than everybody else. You're much more resilient, generally speaking. And the same thing, you can kind of draw that out. The advantage I had in the UN, I don't necessarily have here, is you could look through somebody's body of work. Generally, you knew somebody they'd worked with, and you can call them and just ask, what is this person like what they portrayed? And usually you get a yes or a no. There's not much in between. And I know sometimes that informal reference stuff is frowned on in certain organizations, but to me, it's invaluable. If you know somebody that they've worked with, call them and talk to them. Right? That's why networks exist, is to help us solve challenges. But the most important thing for me for the UN was commitment and resilience. Those are the two things. If you're resilient and you're committed, we're going to figure it out from there.
Sure. Yeah. And I feel like those are pretty good values across the board, regardless of what the employment situation. If people are prepared to dig in and commit and be resilient around what needs to happen, if you've got that as across the organization, there's going to be success come your way. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the know yourself. And you mentioned two really critical words, authenticity and consistency. Can you tell us more about how do you do those in reality? Because they're lovely words. Everyone likes, oh, yes, I want to be a really authentic leader. What does that actually look like in your view?
As I said, just being who you are, right? Like I am probably a little more introverted than extroverted by nature, right? I'm very confident in myself. I know that. I don't think there's anything I can't do. And so, like, I think to Gaza, when you stand in front of a group of 80 people and you're talking, our ability to detect BS in everybody is strong, right?
Yes.
Right. You can tell, like, if you look at a politician speaking, you can almost always, they're full of it. They don't believe a word they're saying. But if you're speaking what you believe, what you're committed to, what your values are that you live, that comes across as well. Right. And people get that. And I think, in Gaza, I remember everybody was always worried we weren't helping enough people. And I said, let's be honest, we're not going to help everybody today, but we are going to help somebody. Right.
Yes.
And if you keep helping somebody, eventually we'll help everybody. So don't get lost in this is hard, it's huge. Stay focused on what's in front of you. And I think because I lived that, it came across well and people responded to it. The consistency part to me is really, how do you receive bad information? How do you take bad news? Right? Anybody can take good news. Well, we love it, right? We're all happy. But if you take bad news well, and you don't lash out at whoever comes to you and you kind of stay calm and just work through it, that resonates with people and they feel safe, right? They feel psychologically safe. And then people will bring you bad news, because bad news doesn't get better. It's like fish, right? The longer you leave it out, the worse it's going to get. So you want people to come and tell you, but how you respond to that, how you respond to adversity when things don't go well, in public, if you're calm, if you're focused, that consistency, people also respond to, right? And it doesn't mean you have to be nice, right? I've known some leaders in the Army I thought were terrible people, but they were great leaders, right? They were very consistent, and you could approach them. But again, it's just, you have to be true to yourself, and through that consistency and authenticity, people will respond to you as long as you keep approaching things in the same way. I don't think I've raised my voice more than once or twice in the last 20 years because I don't need to, right? Nobody likes a screamer, maybe unless it's good news and everybody's, you're happy to yell and say congratulations.
Sure.
But
yeah,
it's just not necessary. And people, if you start yelling, people shut down. My grandfather told me this when I was a kid, and I've always remembered, if you get into an argument with somebody, the first person to start yelling loses. And that's kind of how I've approached leadership. You stay calm, keep moving forward, and people respond to that.
Yeah, I think it's some very wise counsel from your granddad there.
Yeah.
What was maybe the most challenging situation you faced in your career where maintaining that consistency and calm was, you really maybe had to dig deep to stay in that zone?
So April 1st, 2024, there was an incident in Gaza with World Central Kitchen, and 7 staff members died. It was bad intelligence, bad response. Israel owned up to it, said they made a mistake. But the next day, April 2nd, I had to stand in front of 80 people and explain what happened and explain what we're doing to try to keep them safe physically. And that was tough. Mm-hmm. And we had another incident in Gaza where a UN staff member lost their life. He'd only been with the UN about 3 weeks. And to have to explain to his family what had happened, those were tough. And I was, I guess, vulnerable myself. I mean, I knew these people, right? So the loss for me was the same as for everybody else, but they're not the ones standing in front of the room explaining what happened and what we're going to do to keep you safe. And it was a very fragile moment. And I remember it very clearly. And just being open with people. And sometimes you have to say, I don't know, because you don't know, right? And we all know the risk when we sign up for these kind of jobs in these kind of environments. But when something bad happens, it really drives home what is the risk, right? It's sort of abstract before that. And just, working through that with people and tell them, look, it's all right to be afraid. It's all right to be scared. We're going to get some counselors in here, give you somebody to talk to, and we're gonna work through this. And we're kind of resetting the board. We're talking with the Israeli army about what went wrong, what we could do better. And there were some things on both sides. And I think it did get better. I mean, it was a horrible cost that we had to pay to get to that point.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that situation where you can't guarantee that people are safe? You're living in a war zone. How do you frame that for that kind of audience?
I mean, I think what you have to do is kind of go back to the basics, and you talk about all the stuff we do from a security and safety perspective, right? And the longer you're in any environment, you start to adapt, right? Like if you move to New York City, you might be scared at first, right? But eventually you figure out where's safe, where's not, and where to go, where not to go. And it was very similar in Gaza. You kind of knew where the dangerous areas were, but what that reinforces, everywhere was dangerous, right? Some were just more dangerous than others.
Sure.
So you take that opportunity again to tell them, I can't guarantee your safety, but what I can tell you is if you do all these things, we can make you as safe as we're going to make you.
Sure.
And it's like I said, it's a horrible cost, but every challenging situation provides an opportunity. The opportunity for us there was to reset our security mitigation measures, make sure everybody was following them, which we did. And the hardest part for me was always wondering, what could I have done differently? Is there anything I could have done differently that would have prevented it? The answer is probably not, but it never removes that doubt from you. And I think it's okay to share that with people as well. And I did, like you wonder, I wonder, could we have done something different? So you can share in the uncertainty and the grief, and talk about what you can do. And people responded, and they know the risks. It doesn't make it any easier, but like I said, just be authentic.
And that's exactly the point I was going to raise. It comes back to that authenticity, but presenting the reality of the situation, not hiding from the reality that but as you say, laying out a system and a process of how we're going to make the very best of the situation without hiding the reality of it. I'm interested, Scott, how have you seen the adaptation of leadership style, your own and others, from a military environment where there is a chain of command through maybe into more of a, let's call it a corporate or a company environment where there is still a hierarchy, but I think that the chain of command expectation is a little bit different. How have you seen yourself or others adapt to that?
Yeah, it's significantly different. Certainly. I sit next door to the CEO and you see everybody just wander into his office and chat. In the military, you never walk into division commander's office just to have a chat, right? Well, what I'll say is I think the military, and I apply this globally, does a great job of leadership development, of training leaders, right? That's true of every military I've been around. I was in the Army 21 years. I think I went to 8 different leadership courses formally. Right. Plus all the training you get every day. I'm sure it's changed, but the Army used to be the definition of leadership was influencing others to achieve the mission by providing purpose, motivation, and direction. Right. I haven't forgotten it all this time. And it's probably adapted, but it's very similar. But as you said, there's a hierarchy and you follow orders. Right. But when you come here, that actually does apply. How you lead people using those principles, it translates very well. And you're providing purpose, motivation, direction, make sure they have the right resources, that they know which direction we're going, so we're all aligned. So I think it translates very well. You just have to remember, and this was my big shock, just because I said do it doesn't mean they're going to. I just assume you're going to do what I tell you, right?
Yeah. Can't court-martial them now.
Yeah, I can't court-martial now. And so sometimes it takes a little more convincing, but that's also good, right? You get some constructive feedback yourself, a little maybe criticism on how you can do things differently. But I think the leadership itself translates very well from the military to the private sector, and the lessons that you learned translate very well. We're going to do some leadership development here in our company that I put together. And a lot of the lessons come from what I learned in leadership school in the military, because they apply very, very well.
So will you be starting each of the leadership development courses with 100 press-ups?
No, I don't know if I can do 100 anymore, but maybe we can see how many everybody can do. That'd be a good starting point. Baseline it.
Keep
a few months
people
to get better.
Vulnerable. Yeah, make them vulnerable early. Okay. Scott, you made a comment earlier about you had experienced some people in the military that were not very nice people. I think you called them bad people, but great leaders. I'm curious around that. It feels like an oxymoron. Can you be both did you use something like bad person or that kind of frame and a good leader?
I wouldn't say they were a bad human being, bad person, but they gave off the aura that they were. I mean, there's company, I never saw them smile. They were always cranky. Yeah. And kind of looked like they hated the world every day when you talked to them. But in spite of that, because they were authentic and they were consistent, people responded to them well. Right? And they were quite smart, most of them. And I think the one common characteristic I would say of extremely successful military officers is resolve, right? If they said they were going to do something, it got done. So you can be a great leader, even if you're perceived as a bad person or an angry is not maybe the right word, taciturn person, as long as you are true to yourself and authentic and you're living the values of the organization, people respond to that. So it's, yeah.
So maybe the frame is you don't have to be loved to be a good leader.
Yeah, that's it.
But you can be a very effective leader, but you do have to be respected. Your people that are following you have to respect you, even if they don't love you.
Yeah, I've always thought you could be liked or respected. Rare leaders are both, but if you don't have one or the other, you're not a very good leader. And respected is better, I think.
Yeah, definitely. If you, with all of your knowledge and experience now, if you could take that back to the young Army grunt, am I allowed to refer to you as that? Sure, when you first joined? What would there be anything you'd do differently in that early part of your career with the knowledge you have now?
It took me a while to figure out who I was, right? Who am I really? What do I want to be? Who do I want to portray myself to, to the public at large, to the military? I guess I should say I knew who I was. It took me a while to be comfortable with who I was. That's a better way to say it. And I would just tell myself, be comfortable. You know who you are, you're right. Embrace it. Just be who you are, and the rest will work out. Okay.
And how would you define who you are as a person?
Like I said, I'm a little introverted. I'm intelligent. I know that I have a lot of self-confidence, resilient, and I have a lot of resolve. And I always kind of thought you had to be very charismatic and outgoing to be a leader, and that's not true. You don't, right? So be comfortable with who you are, work to enhance those characteristics, make them stronger, make them better. And that's what will turn you into a great leader.
Those are great traits and really good insights. And it comes back to the know yourself. And there's an element of maturing, isn't there, into one having the kind of time and space to learn about who you are and know yourself, and then get comfortable with it, and then be able to.
And I think some of it just follows our maturation process as human beings, right? Who you are at 18 is not who you are at 30, and it's not who you are at 40, right? Sure. I think there's some of that as well, just how we mature mentally, physically, emotionally throughout our life. And you got a lot of probably still hormones going on at 18, and it's hard to understand and be comfortable with what you are.
And your frontal cortex hasn't developed yet, exactly. So you don't really think properly. And
exactly. So it's a lot going on at one time, and some people are a little further along on that journey than others.
Okay. Coming back to how you drown out the noise, you've got a practical tip. I think the environments you've operated in have been extreme. If we bring it into the context of probably most of our listeners have maybe just a sense of overwhelm in their day, more to do than there is time to do it in. What's a practical tip you would give someone to identify what is the important and how to drown out the noise?
And what's the main thing you're trying to accomplish? What's the main thing you're trying to accomplish today, right? It's and then what information do you need to make decisions to accomplish that? I mean, it sounds simple, right? But it's actually very hard. So let's say I'm having you over for dinner tonight, right? And I want to, make a nice dinner. So I guess first thing I say is, what do you not eat, right? Let's start there. But then you got to go to the store and you buy stuff. And, if you're in the store, don't think about the meals you're making the next 5 days. Just think about the one you're making tonight. Next 5 days don't matter. They'll come. It'll be okay, right? So just keep the main thing, all right? Yeah. And I think what often happens is people think too far ahead. Not saying you shouldn't, but if you're making decisions for today, don't maybe worry about the decision you have to make Thursday, right? Worry about the decision for today. Figure out how you process information. And by that, I mean, I used to like to write things down on 3x5 cards so I could look at it. Some people like take voice notes, listen to themselves. None of it's right or wrong. How do you process information? What makes the most sense to you? So kind of figure out, how do I process things? What decisions do I have to make? And from that, what points of information must I actually have in my possession to make the decision? And if you start stripping all that stuff away, it makes it a much more manageable process. In the first Gulf War, General Schwarzkopf led the coalition, and he had a habit that he followed throughout his life, where every day he wrote down on a 3x5 card 3 opportunities and 3 challenges religiously every day. And that helped. That's how he processed information, right? So you just have to figure out what works for you. And that's how I think you drown out the noise.
Yeah, it's about bringing focus, whatever tool you use to bring that focus. And once you're focused on there, you can't look in your peripheral vision while you're focused, right? Yeah, correct. The sniper can't be looking behind them while they're looking down the scope going forward.
Exactly. You got to kind of keep the main thing.
Yeah, it's good. The other frame I like around in a similar context is we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in the short term, but underestimate what we can achieve in the long term. So yeah, keep the main thing and make it realistic about what can be achieved. So if you're writing down your 3 opportunities and your 3 challenges, don't expect that you're going to solve the world's problems today. Think about and what's the one step towards maybe that thing that you can achieve today.
Yeah, and I think that's what General Schwarzkopf, that's how he used it, was what are my priorities today, and what are the things that might get in the way?
Yeah.
Right. It's, like I said, there's not a right or wrong way to do that, but we each have to figure out how we approach that. And from there, it makes it more manageable.
Great. Hey, Scott, it's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. There's such a wealth of experience there that you can bring to the table, and you've achieved it in some very challenging environments. So thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to close out with one question. If you could choose to be anyone other than yourself for the day, who would you be?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess with many answers kind of on different levels. I don't know. I think I would choose to be my wife, actually. for a day.
Yeah.
She's also a senior leader in the UN, and we have kind of different skill sets. But I love her dearly, and I would love the opportunity to know more about her, how she thinks, how she approaches things. And I think that would really be kind of an interesting juxtaposition of viewpoints.
It would. I love that insight. I thought you were going to say I'd love to be my wife today, because then I'd get to experience how amazing I am as a husband.
Well, I could have said that too. I might tell her I said that just for fun. But yeah, she's pretty brilliant woman, and we approach things much differently, which I like. Actually, we learn a lot from each other. But it'd be really interesting to kind of be in that space for a day.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer, Scott. I love it. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Really enjoyed the insights you've shared, and I'm sure our audience have got some great takeaways they can go and work with straight away today. Thanks for joining.
Thanks very much, Ryan.
Disclaimer: Level 10 Leaders is an independent podcast and leadership development platform. It is not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by EOS Worldwide LLC. EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, Level 10 Meeting, and related trademarks are trademarks of EOS Worldwide and are used here for informational purposes only. Thanks for tuning in to Level 10 Leaders. If today's episode hit home, here's what you need to do. Take the LMA quiz. Go to lvl10.us/LMA. It's fast and reveals what's holding you back. Hit subscribe and share this with one person who needs to break through the ceiling and crush their growth goals. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll show you exactly how to level up to level 10.